Hi everyone. I wanted to talk about training methods today and my own approach with my two horses. Probably if you've been watching any of my videos, I do, a bit of tongue in cheek at times, but the reality is my training method with my horses is a mixture of my young days and my time with the horses now. What radically changed my method was the fact that when I got Billy, I was legally blind and I had no choice but to change a lot of the early learning and a lot of the standard training methods that you see today. That involved using my voice, also my arms for signals. I had to think of ways to engage Billy and teach him at the same time because I wanted to work with him. I was very limited in what I could do. That's why I think I radically changed a lot of my thoughts about horse training. I also realised I had to ask him rather than enforce what I wanted him to learn. And so I got into a pattern, actually, with both horses, was to ask them. If he said yes, I worked with him. If he said no, I stopped. I never pushed him or myself beyond our limits. And if I was having a bad day, I quit. If I was having a good day, we'd go a bit longer. And so, I know there's not a one size fit all, but when you get to my age, and I've got 45 years plus of horse handling experience, I'm still learning. There's a lot I'm still coming to terms with in terms of my own physicality. I'm a lot older now and I have a lot more ailments. But I think if I've learned anything over this period of time, and that is to build a really strong and solid bond with your horse. And with Brumbies, that can take a bit longer because they usually start out with big trust issues. I was lucky with Bill that he was young when I got him, and being the sort of personality type he is, he was much more willing to give me a go once he got over his initial fear and anxiety. And also, he was extremely shut down. So once we moved past those sort of issues with him, and I played lots of games with him, he really began to open up as a horse with a personality. And I quickly discovered that he was extremely intelligent. So early on in my training, I focused a lot on teaching the horses manners. And the reason I did that is because, when you get older, you can't move as fast out of the way if the horses are going to have a dispute with each other. And horses do tend to, especially at dinner time. And you don't want to be collided or run over with a horse simply because they were being ignorant or you were not being mindful. So there's two issues there. You always got to be mindful when you're working around your horses. And number two, your horses need to learn to respect your space and if they're going to squabble, not to do it over the top of you. I've actually taught my horses a lot about groundwork and in groundwork about manners and behaving themselves around me, simply because I don't feel I should be the one that has to run out the way to avoid being hurt. And so simple things, but in the big picture of life, really important issues, because if you get run over by your horse, you're going to end up with serious issues, or you get bitten or kicked by your horse, you start to lose trust. So how I did it when I was, as I said, virtually legally blind back in those days, I taught verbal commands, very clear and concise verbal commands, and followed it up with arm signals. Again, I used more of a dog obedience approach. If I wanted to send them away, I pointed in the direction I wanted them to go, and I would either say go or I'd say move, in a firm tone and with my head pointed in the direction. Now, I couldn't really see where I was pointing to, but I did expect them to do as they were told. It's just those basic lessons that you teach your horse in the early days are the ones that are going to save you from having problems in the long run, respect is everything, and respect goes both ways. So if the horses are grumpy, or for example, Bella's in season at the moment and she's super grumpy at the moment, so I don't push her. I don't push past her barriers because she's uptight and. Bill's the same. Bill will move right away from her. Yesterday, I knew she was coming into season because he was standing on one side of the paddock and she was on the other. And he did that all afternoon, and this morning was the same. So he doesn't want to be around her when she's really moody, and neither do I, to tell you the truth. So we leave her to her devices. And it's not because I think, she's going to harm me or do anything like that. It's just nobody wants to be around a cranky horse or a cranky person. I think one of the real issues when dealing with horses is trust. A lot of people are scared of their horses, and or intimidated. They have a certain amount of confidence, but when it comes down to it, they don't trust the horse with their welfare. They think that the horse is going to, um, you know, when it comes down to the fight or flight. And that's because it's such a dominant teaching these days that horses are just fight and flight creatures and that they have no thinking skills. And with some horses that is the case. That I mean, let's put it this way: if I had to trust which horse was going to look after me the most, it's going to be Billy, and simply because Billy's more thinking when it comes to a fear response. He doesn't automatically react and then think. He thinks and then reacts. In Bella's case, she reacts and then thinks. So her first instinct is to run a few steps away, look up, and see what it is. In Billy's mind, he stops, looks up, assesses the situation, and then if it looks a bit scary, he might move away. Sometimes he'll go and investigate. But if I'm in their proximity, I'd much rather be standing next to Bill if something is going on than next to Bella, simply because she doesn't think before she acts, whereas Billy thinks before he acts. So there's just little issues that are not trust issues, they're more to do with the personality type of the horse. So when you're training your horse, you've really got to understand who they are as a horse, and you won't know that if you don't spend enough time with them. I know life is busy, and the way people have to work to be able to survive, to pay for their horses. So often during the week, people are in and out and feed their horses, or if they're in an adjustment facilities where they don't have to, they turn up on the weekend, give the horses a bit of a groom, jump on their back, and expect the horse to perform. Well, horses are not commodities. They're sentient creatures, and they want to have a relationship with you and a relationship of trust. So trust goes both ways. Your horse has to be able to trust you, and you have to be able to trust the horse. You can't just assume that it's there, and also you can't spend your life being scared of your horse, because things are more likely to happen. I think I call it Murphy's law. If you're scared of your horse, it's much more likely that something stupid is going to happen than if you're confident and calm. So I always try to be confident and calm around my horses. As I said, I don't worry as much around Bill as I do around Bella. And given time, I think Bella will get better and better. I mean, I've had her for 5 years now, and if you'd seen her in the beginning days when she was just extremely reactive to everything, nowadays she barely bats an eyelid unless she's in season, and then she can be a bit silly sometimes, but that doesn't last for long. So I've got to know her, she's got to know me. She's very loving and sweet mare with me. But again, if it come down to it, I think that if there was something, if she got a bad fright, I don't think she's always mindful of exactly where I am. She does run backwards away from me rather than forwards over the top, whereas Bill will stand still, and he's always mindful. So it's interesting when you're working with different horses and personality types. I think you have to make mental adjustments. Just food for thought, really. Because I was 90% blind and had very poor quality vision, I found it very difficult to use tools on the horses, whether it be halters or gear. So most of the time I handled them without any sort of equipment, and relied very much on my verbal and skills and my hand signals. And funny enough, I've had my eye operations. I had cataracts on both eyes because of a genetic disease that I have, really inflamed my eyes. And so it limited a lot of what I could do. Also, it affected my muscles, and I had tremors. So I just found it very difficult to physically do anything with the horses for quite some time. So I had to rely on my own relationship with them and asking them to do things. So how I really began the horse training with my two was at Liberty. I still do a lot of what I call Liberty work with them. I only put a halter on, say, them every now and then. Most of the time, I simply ask them to do what I want. And I know that sounds really funny, but they do. If I say move, they move. If I say come, they come. If I say walk on, they walk on. So they know, they've got a fair range of understanding when it comes to language skills. So it's Bill more so than Bella, but I'll tell you something about Bella. Up until about 2 years ago, she had wanted nothing to do with training. And now, whenever I'm training Bill, she wants to be a part of it. And I haven't put the video. I put that funny video up yesterday of her and me and Bill walking around in the round yard. But in all honesty, most of the work that I do with him is off lead, off halter. I don't need to put anything on him. He does what I ask. Sometimes he's a bit lazy and doesn't want to, but most of the time he'll do what I ask. If I say stand, he'll stand. I groom him without putting a halter on. I do groundwork by just telling him what to do, pointing, or I'll show him. I know that sounds really silly, but he'll stand there and watch, and I'll show him, and then I'll call him to come, and then I will repeat what I showed him by parrot fashion, and so he's learnt a lot. Also, I played a lot of games with him. Green light, red light. I used to walk around the paddock, and I'd move at different speeds, and I'd zigzag and do all kinds of silly things and laugh, and he'd chase me around. And so when I'd suddenly stop, he had to stop too. And we still play those silly games. And what I was teaching him all the time was it's a form of the drawing, but it's an unorthodox. So I wanted him to follow me. I wanted him to walk with me. I wanted him to stop when I stop. I wanted him to learn the commands of walk on because of my own physical limitations. So ultimately, when I'm on his back, if my legs are not working properly because of the genetic disorder, if I've got muscle weakness, then I don't have to try and get him to go forward using my feet. I can just say to him, walk on, and he'll walk on. So just, that's where verbal commands are really important, and especially if you've got disabilities. So my methods are really designed for people with disabilities and for older people, and so, if you learn anything from what I'm talking about, it's safety, working at Liberty, and why I altered so much of my own basic learning skills to and adapted them to present day. While I was grooming Bill here, I was also looking at his sides, and noticed that he'd stopped chewing on his sides, which is a really good sign. Since he had his teeth done, he's obviously feeling a lot happier. And also, I've taken him off um, his oat and hay. I mean, when I say that, I still give him washed out oat and hay, which I've soaked for about an hour to make sure there's no sugar or starch in there, but he's not keen on that. So mainly he's just grazing and on multi cubes and loosen. Next week, I'm going to get him some golden oldies type food, because for the next couple of years, I've really got to watch his dentition. But in the meantime, I've decided I am going to continue training him. My biggest challenge will be when I'm on his back, will be getting off. Like I said before, I'm physically limited and have muscle weakness, and so that can be a real issue for me. So, in my ground training, I'm going to teach him to stand. I'm going to have to make another, or fix up my old temporary ladder, and teach him to park himself, so I can get on and off without having to get hit the ground because my knees just can't hold me up. And we've still got lots and lots to do. And I still think most of it I'm going to teach him using the draw-in process and just lots of praise. He's like a puppy dog. He loves praise. If you praise him for doing a good job, he remembers things and he does it again. So yeah, look, I think over the next few weeks, I'm going to drag out when my back's a little bit better, I'm going to drag out my old temporary mounting stand, fix it up, stick it in the round pen, and teach him to park himself so I can get on and off. The ground's pretty hard in the round pen, so I'm raking it up at the moment, just trying to get rid of any stones or rocks that have come up out of the ground over the last 6 months because I haven't used it for quite some time. And I want the ground to soften up too. I'm going to throw some seed down, I think, to try and grass it up a bit more, just in case if I do try and get off Bill without using a mounting stand. I want to see, I need to test my knees and see if they can hold me up, because there will be times if I want to go out riding with him at some time in the future that I have to be able to get off. And the other thing about that is that one of the reasons that I'm really strong on teaching him to come and do a recall is that if I did come off and he got a fright and ran away, I could call and he'd come back. And so far, look, I've come off plenty of times. When I say come off, it's when I've been dismounting, and it's not Bill. When my feet touch the ground, my knees give away, and so down I go, rolling around on the ground like a mad woman. And fortunately for me, Bill, like I said to you earlier, he's very conscious of where I am on the ground, and he doesn't run off. He just puts his head down and looks at me, waits for me to sit up, and often I just use his leg to pull myself back up and stand up again. But I'm going to have to test myself out to see if I can get off appropriately. And if I did ever come off, I want him to stay around and wait for me. And look, in all honesty, I don't think he'd ever leave me. He's got very strong ideas about being around me. He will choose 99% of the time to spend his time with me, follow me around. Bella does too, actually. If I'm outside, no matter where I am, those two will most of the time be with me. And so I have a certain level of understanding, I think, between them and myself when it comes to, trust. And would Bill run off and leave me? Maybe, maybe not, but we'll wait and see when that day comes, if it ever comes. But look, I do know that, when he's got off the property and he's been free, I've been able to recall and he's come to me. Same with Bella. So I do think that recalls with horses do work. And so that if you have an accident or they get a fright and shy and you come off, you need to be able to call your horse to come back, or you want them to stand beside you. So that's also one of my aims in training, is to just keep reinforcing what my expectations, and so Bill understands me clearly, and that he uses his common sense rather than uses the natural fright and flight tendencies that horses have. Well, there was lots to talk about in this video, and most of this is just my general thoughts and my own behaviours around my own horses. And I have my approach. My husband Kel has his approach with the horses as well, and they have a lovely relationship with him. And I don't try and tell him how to handle the horses, and he doesn't try and tell me. We do our own thing, and but both of us spend a fair bit of time bond building. I'd say that if there's anything that we do the same, that is always reaffirming our relationship with our horses, and we're committed to giving them the best life that they can have. And I think that's really important. Too many horses end up on the sales merry-go-round, and especially Brumbies. Brumbies are up against it because they're being culled at the moment, and they're constantly being culled in places like New South Wales. I don't think there's really any wild Brumbies left in Victoria, to be honest. So Brumbies are up against it. So if you're thinking about getting a Brumbie, you've also got to think about how much time you're prepared to spend with them. If you put the time and the commitment in, I tell you what, you will end up with the best darn horse around. They're phenomenal animals. They're thinkers. Most of them are thinkers, and they've learned to be that way because they were born in the wild and had to adapt. And I just see so many differences between a domestic born horse and a wild horse. And Billy's really shown me the difference. Anyway, if you like our channel, please subscribe, and I will catch you all up. And thanks for listening today.